Looking back at my Disney Royalty series, I can't help but think about what made me want to do it in the first place. So if you look at the entirety of the Disney Royalty line, from Snow White to currently Moana, I like to think that there's a lot we can learn about how much character and storytelling has changed over the years. One of the reasons I did this series was in response to some people claiming that Disney princesses were examples of sexist tropes and how it demeaned women and how they were just bad role models. And it didn't just stop at people like Anita Sarkeesian, but also to people like Kristen Bell, who plays Anna, who felt concerned about the message Snow White sent to her daughters, and even spoke out about it. So she looks at her girls and asks, "Don't you think it's weird that Snow White didn't ask the old witch why she needed to eat the apple, or where she got the apple, totally ignoring that the old lady explains why she has to eat the apple?" I say I would never take food from a stranger. Would you? And my kid's like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm doing something right." Well, your kid should already know that watching the movie. Your kid should know at the end of Snow White, oh, I shouldn't take food from strangers. Don't you think that it's weird that the prince kisses Snow White without her permission because you cannot kiss someone if they're sleeping? And that expanded into something else, a whole other conversation with the Japanese sociologists claiming that, Disney princes are just, sexual offenders. And I'm just,
Everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
and Keira Knightley went the extra mile as well when she said this.
No, it's not cool to wait for a rich guy to save you, save yourself. No, it is never cool for any man that you don't know to kiss you in your sleep without consent. Not okay. No, never give your voice up for a man. Absolutely not. Not okay.
To which I just have to go,
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Now, to be clear, I was working on the Disney Royalty series before this, and it sort of just fueled me on to keep going. And I hate to sound like that particular fan. Like, we all know that one guy who just feels like there is such a lack of understanding of the movies and the character. Like, you just don't get it.
Am I the only one who understands the complexities of this ambitious cinematic masterpiece?
But these people could look at such great characters and just label them as naive when they're innocent, weak when they're strong, insecure when they're passionate, and monsters when in reality they're heroes. It just felt like such a disgrace to like everything. And yeah, they're not perfect, but to just look at it and just say, well, this is all they are. It felt kind of insulting in some ways. Now, we could argue the morality of fairy tales until we're blue in the face, but I think there is something of merit to every era and character, and whatever problem there is or isn't is outweighed by the strengths. So let's take a look at it. So we have the Golden Age. This is the era of fairy tales at its finest, of main characters who are just good people in bad situations. Snow White is a 14-year-old girl who just found out her stepmother wants her dead. Cinderella is stuck in an abusive home with nowhere else to go. Live action movie craps on that, which is why we don't go there. And Aurora finds herself unable to live the life she herself wants with the person she wants. Works out at the end, but from her perspective, her life is over. The princes are archetypal heroes, honestly, and it's sad that's really all I can say about the Disney prince at this point, and it's something you never hear enough people talk about. Next to no one knows that this guy has a name, that this one still doesn't officially have one, and this guy, like Aurora, is regulated to having no voice of his own. Like, literally by the last third of the movie, or like the last fourth of the movie, neither he nor Aurora say anything. It's not their story. The Disney princesses share a range of emotions, but the princes are mostly all these one-note characters defined by their interaction with just one character. When Ralph Breaks the Internet had Rapunzel say this, what I feel is a stupid line.
Do people assume all your problems got solved because a big strong man showed up?
I think the one for the prince would be, do people think all there is to you is to save someone? Because that honestly is the Disney prince. It was why I was so set on saying that Taran and Arthur were Disney princes, as they gave the lineup the much-needed character that they needed. As a character idea, the Disney prince and princesses are their most archetypal here. They are more representations of who we should be as people. The movies are often less about them and more about the world they inhabit interacting with them. That's why it's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's just the seven dwarves and their meeting of Snow White. Cinderella is more the story of Jack and Gus. The Disney Renaissance. Now, this is the age of characters and music. Gone was the world interacting with the princess. The princess is now interacted with the world. There was something endearing about the passion of Ariel, the temperament of Belle, the principles of Jasmine, the dignity of Pocahontas, and of course the character of Mulan, who I felt personified the Disney Renaissance era princess in a way that few could. The Disney prince here came alive as well. While still a hero, he, for the most part, wasn't always so sure of himself. Rarely was this character someone whose sole purpose was to be there to save the girl and ultimately be her reward at the end. They were, for the most part, equals in the story. They had dreams, fears, personality, and they even got to sing. This, I felt, was shown best in The Beast, who showed us exactly the kind of range the idea had. He's an amazing, tragic figure. He goes through a range of emotion. Otherwise, we go to Aladdin, who actually is the lead in his story. That's why it's called Aladdin.
Duh.
His story is about him understanding his self-worth, which was something that we saw in the Disney Dark Ages with Taran and Arthur. Now we go to the post-Renaissance. I call this the era of story and character. Not so much on the music, but there was this idea going around that the characters should be established in their own world before the movie started. And what I mean is, it's not just, okay, this is Cinderella's life, and here she is now. It's something has happened that sort of defines the characters as they go forward. So what I like about the post-Renaissance era is the simple moments that defined it, whether it be Lilo and Nani's heartwarming interactions or the amazing characters of Milo Thatch and Jim Hawkins. There was something wholesome in this era. I think the highest point would have to be Merida, who, while not a character I super love, had a story that Disney had never really tried, in that there really was no actual villain, and the story itself was very singular. Now we come to the revival. When I think of the revival, I tend to think of Rapunzel and her song, When Will My Life Begin? Because a lot of these characters, especially the princesses, are really just trying to start their lives. They have dreams that they're actively pursuing, things they want for themselves, responsibilities they want to embrace, and to forge their own way in life. The princes themselves really do have more emphasis on their relationship to the princess, like Naveen and Tiana, Rapunzel and Flynn, / Eugene, / Flugene, and of course Anna and Kristoff. But because that relationship is fleshed out so much more, it works much better here. A downside of this era that was set in the post-Renaissance era is the loss of the Disney villain. And again, that school of character I feel is very important, and I should probably talk about that in another video. But one of the reasons was the stories are now focused on the obstacle being the world itself in a very sort of Greek myth sort of style, which is sort of personified in Moana. You know, the obstacles are mostly unconnected to each other. Moana goes on a journey, and the villain is sort of not there. The same thing with Frozen. There is no proper villain in Frozen. There really isn't. It's the story. It's the past. There's no one actively trying to stop anyone, especially in Frozen, especially the first one. Like, Hans is sort of like, I'm the villain now. Villains are cool. So when I look at the Disney royalty line, I'm like, well, who personifies it best? I think it would be too complex to find. Who's the definitive one? I think for different people, it would be something different. It would be whichever story resonates with you the most. But I could look at each era and say, oh, who I think stands out the most. For, you know, the Disney Golden Age, for, you know, that era, it would have to be Cinderella as the definitive princess. And then Philip, because Philip gets to carry on the stories that his, you know, predecessors didn't get to do. Going into the Renaissance, I would have to say Mulan is the best princess. And of course, The Beast. The reason I say that is because I think that era really does come together because of its sad moments, because of the moments of vulnerability that the characters have. And Mulan and the Beast sort of personify that better than any of them could have in that era. Post-Renaissance, it has to be Nani and Jim Hawkins. Nani is such an interesting character because she plays off of Lilo and Stitch. And her story in the back is just really, really great. And it's a bit of a shame it never went anywhere further. Jim Hawkins, between him and Milo Thatch, I always felt that Jim Hawkins played off of, had the right amount of characters to play off of. Whereas with Milo gets overshadowed by a lot of the other characters. The Revival kept me awake for a while. It really, really did, because there's a lot of good stuff in the Revival. We could go with Rapunzel, who is trying to merge the past and the present. Like, okay, let's take everything that worked in the past and try to go in a new direction. I like that. I do. But we also can't ignore Moana. Moana, who sort of took the Disney princess idea and said, well, you know, there was something really cool that happened in Brave, but we need to go a step further with that. We need to make it just about the character embracing the responsibility, embracing the destiny, charting their own path. It works in that way. But then, of course, we see Tiana, who is a great love letter to the Disney Renaissance era. A lot of what Princess and the Frog is a love letter to everything that was great about the Disney Renaissance era. I would say like definitively, if I had to put a gun to my head, I had to pick, I would probably say Rapunzel, because Rapunzel sort of lays that groundwork there. And for the prince, now the prince was very interesting because the Disney prince for the revival era really took Aladdin as its template. There's a certain cynical nature to the Disney prince by the revival era. And one would say again, Eugene might be the best choice. But again, I'm very hesitant for that, because Eugene's cynicism is great, and we see the change there, the impact one person can have on you. But then we come to Naveen. Naveen, also like Eugene, is impacted by his interactions, but Naveen, I think, is the stronger character because he's willing to change who he is. He's willing to grow up, and that's great. As much as I love Kristoff for Lost in the Woods, which is, people have yet to really realize that that's the first solo love song a Disney princess ever had. There was supposed to be one in Cinderella, but that got cut. So I would have to say Naveen. So that would be it. Rapunzel and Naveen as, I think, the best of the Disney revival era. So that's it. What do you guys think about this? Who do you think is your definitive Disney prince or princess? Who's the worst? What do we need to do going forward? Check out some other videos and I'll catch you all later. This is Mike Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching, and as always, may your fandom serve you well.